went to meet her mother, who took her to the abode of a scary outcast priest at the edge of town. The prince gave her a tonic. Put this in her drink, and she won't be able to speak anymore, he said. We will do as you say, Didi said. She went back with her daughter to her home. You must make sure you give the tonic to her. Make sure she takes it in your presence too. There is no way the prince will take a liking to her if her voice is poisoned, Didi said to her daughter. Once upon a time, somewhere in the east, there was a special town called Aga, also known as White Town. The townspeople loved the color white, especially royalty, and a great percentage of everything in the village was white. Now, there was something interesting about that town. They could only produce a daughter every 10 years. The family the daughter was born to was considered to be a lucky family, and oftentimes the child was to be betrothed to the prince. It was believed that the lucky daughter would bring prosperity to the palace. The other men had to go to other towns to seek wives to marry. Jago lived with his wife Ronnie in White Town. They were very poor and had 10 lazy sons. Jago always went to his small farm to work with his wife while his sons fooled around the town, cracking jokes and constituting a nuisance. I am tired of these boys, Jago said one day to his wife. All they do is consume my food and fool around. I know, I have lost all hope with them. The only son that is a bit sane is Yobo, who goes around playing the flute all over the town, Ronnie said. The special star year is next month. We can try. Maybe we would be blessed with a daughter, Jago said. Lots of women get pregnant the 10th year in hopes of having a daughter, and only one will be lucky. What are the chances that the child would come to us? Ronnie asked. You never know. We might get lucky. We have suffered enough, and it's time for the heavens to look at our side, Jago said. As you know, I have gotten older, and it would be stressful for me. I will be disappointed if I give birth to a foolish son again. I already have 10 of them, Ronnie said. This is your last year. In the next 10 years, you wouldn't be able to try again. If it turns out to be a boy, then we must train him to be a responsible young man, Jago said. Fine, I'll give this one last try, Ronnie said. The next month, a lot of women discovered they were pregnant. Everyone wanted to have the lucky daughter. The girl born 40 years ago was married to the king. The girl born 30 years ago got married to the biggest chief in town. The one of 20 years was betrothed to the prince of the land, while the one born 10 years ago was only a little girl. Ronnie was very excited when she discovered she was pregnant. She carried herself like an egg, and Jago worked extra hard to make sure she didn't have to stress herself. Her foolish sons had to help around the farm to meet up. There was drought in the town, and that meant the harvest was poor. Everyone began to lament in the town about the hardship going on. The king was worried and tried to pacify the people, but they were getting impatient. The king called the son, Prince Kanto, to his private chambers. My son, you are turning 17 soon. You are going to become king someday, so it's better you familiarize yourself with what is happening in the town, the king said. Of course, your highness, I understand, the prince said. Good, you've heard about what is happening. The priest told me that a girl will be born soon, and she will bring blessings to the land. I want that girl to be betrothed to you, the king said. But I am already betrothed to Philly. She's turning 10 in a few days, the prince said. This child that will be born soon would be better for you. She carries a lot of grace and would bring a lot of blessings, the king said. I heard that it is dangerous to marry two White Town's original daughters, the prince said. Forget about that. Just have it in your mind that you will be marrying the child that will be born soon. Immediately she is 18, the king said. A few days after, the cloud got dark, and the heavens released its water. The king jumped for joy in his room. He knew that the miracle daughter had been born. Ronnie put to bed in her room. She couldn't afford health care and had to call on the midwives to assist her. They all jumped for joy when they discovered it was a female child. Jago danced in joy, jumping in the rain in excitement. Ronnie cried. She was finally having a daughter. They decided to name her Whitney. Whitney was a special girl. She looked very different. She was incredibly beautiful and had long hair. Her eyes glittered and her skin shone like the sun. The whole town gathered to see the beautiful baby. The king gave them a special visit to his palace. He gave them a nice house and some money. Yobo was also appointed to play the flute in the palace. The family grew rich after that. They loved Whitney with all of their hearts. She was their lucky charm. Whitney grew up to be an amazing girl. She became even more beautiful and was very intelligent for her age. She was the envy of all in the town. She was homeschooled by a special teacher, which was provided by the king. At the age of 10, her eyes began to interchange from brown to blue. Everyone thought it was weird. Her hair suddenly became so long and her beauty multiplied. The town was expecting another daughter on the 10th year again, and a lot of women began to get pregnant. Unfortunately, no female child was born. Everyone was surprised and confused at what was going on, but they had no choice than to wait till the next 10 years. As soon as Whitney was 15, she received a special invitation from the king. He wanted to protect Whitney at all costs. He thought she was powerful, and it was because of her no other female had been born. He wanted to keep her till she was 18. Whitney was very happy to be in the palace. She was given a beautiful room and was very excited. Meanwhile, Philly and her mother heard of the news. Philly was 25 years and she felt it was time for her to marry the prince. She was the original daughter betrothed to the prince. Why wasn't the king saying anything? I hope they didn't take that girl to the palace as a wife for the prince, Philly's mother, Didi said. But she's underage, Philly said. It doesn't matter. The king has his eyes on that girl, and we must stop it. You must go to the palace immediately. We cannot let that little girl steal your crown, Didi said. Yes, mother, Philly said. She decided to fake a strange sickness so she could live in the palace. Philly cried that she needed to be in the palace where the royal healers were. She wanted to also be with the prince. In order not to raise any suspicions, the king allowed it. Whitney loved the palace gardens and she loved to listen to her brother, Yobo, play the flute. One day, she was taking a stroll in the garden when she saw Philly and Kanto talking. Greetings, my prince, Whitney said with a bow, and the prince flashed her a smile. Remember to greet me too. I am the crowned princess, Philly said angrily. I'm sorry, but I wasn't aware of that, Whitney said. How are you enjoying your stay in the palace? Kanto asked. Oh, it's so lovely over here, Whitney smiled. I especially love the garden. I'm glad. Let me know if you need anything, Kanto said. Of course, Whitney smiled sweetly. Excuse us, you've been here for far too long, Philly said angrily. Whitney nodded and left their presence. You mean a tune? She loved to sing, but only in private. The only person she could sing to was Yobo, while he played the flute. He had encouraged her to come out as a singer, but she refused. As Philly watched her leave, she knew she had to do something. Whitney was dangerously beautiful, and the prince seemed to be warming up to her. In the comfort of her room, Philly thought of what to do with Whitney. Let's see. Her attractive points are her long hair and blue eyes. I must get rid of it, Philly said to herself. She went to meet her mother, who took her to the abode of a scary outcast priest at the edge of town. The prince gave her a tonic. Put this in her drink, and she won't be able to speak anymore, he said. We will do as you say, Didi said. She went back with her daughter to her home. You must make sure you give the tonic to her. Make sure she takes it in your presence too. There is no way the prince will take a liking to her if her voice is poisoned, Didi said to her daughter. Of course, I can't wait, Philly said in excitement. She went back to the palace and prepared a grape wine. She put it on a tray and knocked on Whitney's door. Who is there? Whitney asked. It is I, Philly. Please let me in, Philly said. Whitney stood up and opened the door for her. What a surprise. You have never been to my room, Whitney said. I know. Philly walked in and looked around the room in silent anger. Whitney's room was way better than ours. So what brings you here? Whitney asked. Oh, right. I came to offer a peace offering. We are original daughters of this town, and we must get along. We carry a lot of power within us, and joining forces would be the best. Don't you think? Philly asked. I have always admired you and wished to be close to you. I think it's a good idea, Whitney said. So what do you say? Friends? Whitney asked and stretched out her hands. Friends, Whitney nodded and shook her hands. Good. Please, accept this wine as a token, Phyllis said. Oh, thank you, Whitney said and gulped it down. Phyllis' eyes lit up in an evil smile. I'll see you some other time, Phyllis said and left the room. She went to her room and jumped up in joy. Silly girl, she has charmed her way into the king's heart that he even gave her the best room. I really underestimated that Whitney girl. She is small but mighty, Phyllis said. Moments later, the queen summoned Whitney to her quarters and she ordered the invitation immediately. Oh, my dear, you are growing into a beautiful woman, the queen said. Whitney gave a charming smile. Your eyes, they are so mesmerizing. You'll be perfect for my son, the queen said. I don't know about that. Philly is perfect and is very beautiful. I'm sure she'll be getting married to the prince soon, Whitney said. Honestly, it's you I prefer. As one of the town's original daughter, I can recognize a pure heart when I see one. You, my dear, have a pure heart. Unlike Philly, whose heart is filled with darkness, the queen said. Thank you, my queen, Whitney said, starting to feel awkward. If you need anything, please let me know, the queen said, stroking Whitney's long hair. Whitney was about to respond, but her voice came out like a croak, just like a frog. The queen jolted up in surprise. What was that? She asked. Whitney was about to respond, but she croaked again. Oh my! The queen was shocked. Whitney held her throat in confusion and fear. What is going on? The queen began to panic. I must get help. The queen ran off the room and returned with some of the palace workers. They all gathered around Whitney, who immediately became embarrassed. Speak, let them hear you, the queen commanded. Whitney croaked like a frog and they all gasped in surprise. One of the palace workers examined her throat and saw that it was red. I think she has been poisoned, he said. Poisoned? The queen was surprised. Yes, my queen. I don't know much, but I know a poisoned skin when I see one. The priest must be called immediately, he said. Whitney sat still in fear and panic. She wondered what her fate was and hoped that she would not sound like this forever.